today. The snow is falling. It is beautiful. If you are joining us online, we are so glad that you're joining us that way as well. I've heard of lots of families being not very well this weekend. So if that's you, we hope you are feeling better soon. We're glad you're joining us for this anyway this morning. Just a couple of announcements for you today. Here's what's going to be the easiest way to do this. Instead of just trying to remember all the things that I say, take out your phone, open your Church Center app, because everything is in there, I think, supposedly, in my mind. Well, let's see. This will be fun. You can be my test subjects. Here we go. All right, next Sunday, we have lots of fun planned next Sunday. Branch students, you have a winter fest to go to. Lots of outdoor winter fun activities. So ice skating, broom ball, lots of things. So super fun. Yeah, Brian? Batting 1,000 so far. Good, good. Excellent. All right, I'm going to go home, y'all. Here we go. There's the vibe. I know. I kind of like it. All right, not tonight. That is true. Sorry, I didn't change that. Next week, Sunday, you're going to go out to Cran Hill. We'll leave here about 1 o'clock and then head out. So what do you do in between 11 and 1? Do you go home? What do you do? No, you stay here because everybody is invited to a potluck next Sunday. So after worship, we'll head downstairs. We're going to do a baked potato bar. We'll try something different. We'll make the baked potatoes. You bring toppings. There's a whole big list in a sign-up Genius. Grab one of those things, or if you have something else super random that you'd like to put on baked potatoes, bring that too. It'll be great fun. And then right after that, then students can head out and go have their winter fun. All right? So next Sunday, all-day event. It'll be great. What's up there next, B? Look, I forgot already. Oh, yeah. If you are looking for a way to connect with some other people at the branch and you want to do it in a more informal way than Sundays, a little casual outing, we're putting together some groups that are going to share meals together. So for 3 weekends, you're either going to go out to eat, you're going to cook together, whatever that looks like for your group. If you would like to be a part of a group like that, we'll put you in the same group, so the same people for 3 weekends. If you would like to do that, there's the QR code for you as well. It's also in your Church Center app. So all of that fun and really just a casual way for connection, because February can get kind of dark and sad and lonely. I tend to hibernate in February, so having somewhere to get out and go with some other people would be great fun. So if that's for you, sign up there. And then one thing that is not in your Church Center app yet, group Sundays are coming back later in the end of February, early March. If you have a group that you would like to lead, like some of those embodied faith groups last time around, we did a walking group, a yoga group, a board games group. If there's something active that you would like to lead a week on, come talk to me, talk to Chris, so we can get you started to lead a group. Or if there's something you would like to teach. Stephanie did a sourdough baking class. Nick did a photography class. Anything like that. If you would like to lead one of those groups, let us know. We are planning in the next couple of weeks, so we have some good plans in place by early February, okay? All right. That's all I have to tell you. Summary, look at your Church Center app. Okay? All right. Stand up if you are in the building. Go say hello to somebody. If you are online, say hello in the comments. We'd love to hear how you are all doing this morning, and then we will continue worship in just a little bit. All right, friends, I'm going to invite you to find your seats again, and Stephanie is going to come up and lead us in our call to worship and light the Christ candle for this morning. As she comes up, musicians, you can also come up because we'll go right into a song after that.
I'm just waiting, it's okay. Lord of creation, create in us a new rhythm of life, composed of hours that sustain rather than stress, of days that deliver rather than destroy, of time that tickles rather than tackles. To our packed full planners, we bid peace. To our over-caffeinated consciences, we say cease. To our suffocating selves, Lord, grant release. Drowning in a sea of deadlines and death chimes, we rest in you, our lifeline. By your ever restful grace, allow us to enter your Sabbath rest as your Sabbath rest enters into us. In the name of our Creator, our Liberator, our resurrection and life, we pray. Amen.
You're now invited to worship with us, and you can sit or stand or dance or do whatever feels comfortable. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken, and great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken, and great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth
Thank you very, very much. You all can have a seat. That last little chorus there, we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise to you, only God. We're going to continue doing that in just a little bit of a different way this morning. We often have this practice of prayer together that is in this framework of praise, protest, and petition. So we're going to do that today. We're going to start with praise. If you are online, we invite you to write whatever you want to celebrate with us in the comments, and we will hopefully see those in time and share those in the room as well. But if you are in the room, you have two options. You can either say all the things out loud, or you can do it quietly, and you can put a note in your phone, all the things that you want to pour out your praise this morning. What are the things that you give thanks for today that we can celebrate with you today? Yay for birthdays. I know Brian's birthday is today. We could celebrate that. Who's the other one in your family? Tara was yesterday. Happy birthday. What a weekend. We certainly celebrate those. Mars is turning 12. What day is your birthday, Mars? 31. That's coming up too. I love it. Snow. Brennan, even I'm going to celebrate the snow today with you. That doesn't often happen, but after a week of rainy and cold, the snow is quite beautiful today. So yes, we celebrate that. You start a new job tomorrow, Sam. Congratulations. That's exciting. Mike says friends online. For sure. What, Calvin? Family. You just earned brownie points with your mom, too, with that one. Nice job. Whoa, we're going to celebrate that, too. The teenager makes his parents breakfast. That's a beautiful thing. That's an act of love right there, Calvin. We're celebrating you. Yes, we are. That's what we're doing. Whoa, that's amazing. Elizabeth celebrated a second movie night at her school with 450 families. That's a lot of, roughly, give or take 5. That is a lot of popcorn. That's awesome, Elizabeth. And CJ celebrates the extra popcorn. I love it. Those are beautiful, wonderful things. We pour out our praise, certainly, but we can also pour out other things to God, right? We can pour out our frustration and our anger and all the things that aren't right in this world. Sometimes I think we hesitate to do that as a form of prayer, but the Psalms show us pretty significantly that you can pour out what you need to pour out to God. Psalm 13 says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me?" That's pretty deep, right? That's a pretty solid one. How long will you look the other way? And it's this crying out of, hey, pay attention, something's going on, and I need you to show up. So we can do that today too. We can pour out our protests. What is not right with the world, with your community, in your own life? What are those things that we can stand beside you and hold with you today? We can't solve them, but we can stand with you. Friends in Ukraine. Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. Coworkers struggling with management and higher ups at school, Elizabeth says. It is. Chris said he opened his news feed this morning to news of another shooting in California. Cries of how long indeed. Yeah, the mental health of young people after the shooting in Fruitport. Friends who are struggling with depression and alcoholism. Those are not small things. So crying out in literally crying out. We'll just go there today. How about that? Crying out in frustration and anger to God takes a bit of hope and takes a bit of courage, doesn't it? Because as we name these things, it asks us to say, we trust that God will show up. We trust that God will use us to show up. And that takes a lot. That is a vulnerable place to be, right? And so we move to petition. We move to what we need from God. Maybe even the hardest thing. And yet, as the psalm says, how long, O Lord, in the beginning, the last lines of that say, I trust in your unfailing love, God. I trust in your goodness. And so that gives us courage. It gives us hope that we can trust that God will show up again. So as we name all of those things, what is it that you need this week, in the coming months, maybe right now in this moment? What is it that you need? I need reminders of joy in the midst of all the hard. Hazel, yes, Hazel is joy. Sunshine. I need sunshine too, Sarah Jane. Yeah. Freedom from cynicism, for sure. Leaders who are willing to make hard choices. Yeah, it is a big ask. You're right. That one takes a lot of courage to ask for that. Those are the hard ones to name out loud sometimes. They're the hard ones to even name to ourselves sometimes. I get asked a lot, what do you need? What can I help you with? And it's a hard one to name. It's a hard one to put words to. So we hold all of whatever is happening in your emotions in your heart right now. We hold all that together. And that's why we come together, to hold it so we don't have to hold it alone. Let's end with this prayer. God, we pour all of this out to you. Our praise, our protest, and our petitions, even if we can't name them. And with whatever faith we have, God, we ask for you to show up. We ask for love to show up Show us how to be those people. We trust in your unfailing love, and we will sing your praise because we trust in your goodness. Amen. Kiddos, if you are in preschool through 4th grade, if any of you would like to go downstairs with Janelle, you can. Otherwise, you might just stay here too. Did ya? Never mind, kids, you're not going anywhere.
There were also a couple people who online shared petitions. Amy Ritzma asked for some prayers for her sister, and asked for moments of connection. And Lucy, Janelle's daughter, Mike and Janelle's daughter, asked for courage for standing up for ourselves and others. We share that, Lucy, for sure. All right. Well, I want to invite you to read with me again a passage we've looked at the last couple of weeks. It is from Exodus 20, and it comes from a part of the Bible that's very, very important and very, very well known. It's the 10 Commandments. And the 4th commandment of the 10 is about something called the Sabbath. And let me read to you that commandment here. Exodus 20, 8-11. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but God rested on the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So here's a commandment to take one day a week and have it be different, holy, from the other days. And the main distinction of this day is that you on it would not do any work, right? It's really about the only thing that God says about the Sabbath. A couple of other little clarifications, but they're all about not working. And as I've said in this series, I think each week, it's probably an unrealistic expectation, for most of us anyway, to tomorrow decide that we are going to all of a sudden have a 24-hour period of no work. I just don't think that is likely given the pace of most of our lives. Doesn't mean it's not something to aim for and to think carefully about. I'm not dismissing it entirely, but I am inviting us to be realistic about our lives. And so what we're trying to do in this series is ask, what does Sabbath teach us about things like time and work and relationships? And what might we then take from those teachings or from those things that Sabbath is meant to help us understand and begin to implement now? So just because we might not be able to carve out 24 hours of work-free existence, what can we do? And we'll get to that at the end here today. So the framework that we've been using comes from, for this series, comes from a professor, comes through Janelle, who took a class at seminary last fall on the Sabbath. Thanks, Janelle, appreciate it. And Dr. West has this framework for thinking about Sabbath. That we all have default orientations, default ways that we see the world. And today we're talking about time. So we have default ways of seeing time and thinking about time. Sabbath disorients our default orientation. It disrupts what's normal, what's the status quo, and it helps reorient us in new directions. So last Sunday, we talked about this default orientation to time that we have, where we see time as a commodity to maximize, yes? Or in other words, the shorthand is time is money. We're all very familiar with this. I thought we had. Those of you who were here, you can verify how you felt. I thought we had a great conversation last week as we thought about this idea, this default orientation, that we're to maximize every moment, right? That time is something we must leverage and manage in order to get every last bit out of the time that we have. And Sabbath disrupts that, yes? Because it says, no, for a period you are actually to not maximize anything. You're supposed to take the very thing that helps produce something, your work, and not do it. In order to see, as we talked about last week, that time is a gift. Sabbath teaches us that. Where the default orientation is that time is a commodity, Sabbath teaches us that time is a gift. So we talked about that last week. Today, we're going to talk about another default orientation, and it's that time is linear. Time is linear. I don't know if you'll be able to see this if you're online or not, but we have nice big markers, right? This, in our culture, is what time looks like. And I want us to think for a moment about the implications of this. If this is time, a line with a past and a present and a future, a line that's always moving in one direction, what are the implications of this? What does this mean? Or how does it cause us to think about time when we can, consider that time is linear? What do you think? This is your turn for your voice. What do you think are the implications of time being linear? How do we think about time? Can't go back. That's right. Always forward. I'm just choosing that because it's 2 words instead of your longer, not longer. Can't go back. I know, I apologize. Yeah, it's always moving forward. Can't go back. What does that create for us? Time is always marching forward. What does that do to us? Creates forced movement. That's interesting. A sense of urgency, pressure, desperation. Good. Okay. Definitely. That's a result of this linear way of thinking about time. What else? Ooh, everything else is a function of time. So time, related to that, Elizabeth, thinking in terms of math, and correct me if I'm wrong, but math becomes, in a lot of the formulas I learned, it's a constant. Yes? If you're determining velocity I know as time is a variable, and time's a constant in that variable. In other words, it doesn't change. It's measurable. It's consistent. We have how many seconds in a minute? Yeah, and 1 minute is not 62. And we can consistently measure how long a second is. There's these atomic clocks that blah, 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 smarty pants stuff, right? Keep time consistent. That's probably important to know. Anything else? Yeah. There is a sense of loss, isn't there? With this linear way of thinking about time. Yeah. Yep. Good. Once time is gone, it is gone. Always forward. Never to be repeated. Oof. Just keeping you awake, everyone. Don't worry about it. Just keeping you awake. Okay. So, this is a way of thinking about time, and I just yeah, it kind of segued into what I want to say next, I think, because it's a way of thinking about time. When I asked last week at the start of worship, had you get into groups, and I said, what is time? And you guys talked about it. One student said, time is a social construct. And I was like, look at you. Way to go. You know, they are teaching you well in your school. Everybody kind of get it. Have you heard that before? Have you thought about that before, that time's a social construct? Maybe, maybe not. It's actually quite easy to not think about that. The way that we think about time, both as commodity and as something that's linear, is so default-ish in our lives. It's so woven into the fabric of our culture and existence here that we don't think about it. So we actually don't think very often about how time is a construct. But it is. A little bit of history here as I was learning this week, some things that you might find interesting, I found interesting. Did you know that the first time that we could consistently measure a second and reproduce a second of time wasn't until 1656, when a really smart Dutch scientist, go Dutch, who knew that they contributed to this, but Christian Huygens, I'll say it that way, he invented the first pendulum clock. It's not that we didn't have clocks and ways of tracking time, but the ability to reproduce a second wasn't until 1656. 200 years later, 200 years go by, and do you know that if you lived here in Grand Rapids in the mid-1800s, and you went to the hotel and said, sir, excuse me, could you give me the time? They might say, absolutely, it's 12:19. And you'd walk across the street to the bank and say, excuse me, could you provide me with the time? And they would say, yes, it's 12:02. The time in the this is now not that long ago, time was not synchronized. There were, again, many ways of keeping time, but it wasn't universally or uniformly held. You want to know what changed all that? There's an invention. The telephone's a good idea, but it wasn't the telephone. What'd you say, Mel? Choo-choo! The train. Because if the train's coming into town at noon, and you think it's 12:19 because that's what the bank told you, you're going to be late. But if your clock is running at 12:02, you might catch the train, and there's no synchronized way of making sure we all catch the train. So the trains boom in Britain and in the United States in the mid-1800s, and it dramatically changes the way that we think about and hold time. Interesting, right? It's in the late 1800s, so about 30 years after this time starts to get synchronized, that the most powerful empire on the planet, anybody know what that was at the time? The British Empire, late 1800s. They establish what? GMT. Have you heard of this? Greenwich Mean Time. Greenwich Mean Time becomes the starting point of 24 time zones. The British Empire divides the world into 24 time zones so that we can all have synchronized clocks, so that, frankly, we can make money, is the short of it, because having that synchronized clock helps that happen. And what becomes the standard for time? The British Empire. Long live the Queen, right? No knock on them. I mean, if we had been the most powerful at the time, we might have centered it in New York or something. I mean, it's just kind of what happens. Friends, this is like 130 years ago. This is not that long ago that time starts to become universally and uniformly held. Now, again, we just think 24 seconds or 60 seconds and a minute and an hour, and these things are all just the way that they are, right? And time's always marching on in these increments that are even, and we're all on the same clock. And no, for almost the entire existence of humanity, it's not been this way. Yes, in other words, time is a social construct very much. And let's be honest, there are some really good things that have come from all of these developments. Things have become more productive, more efficient, more capital has been raised. I mean, it's been successful in what it intended to produce. And how nice that I can set up a meeting with someone in California and we can be in sync in a way that allows us to both show up on Zoom at the same time. I mean, there are some real nice things about the way that time has been constructed in our culture. But there might be some costs as well. As there is probably with every way that time has been constructed and understood. I think for us, when we're told that time is always moving forward, and that we better make the most of every second, every minute, every week, every year, we cannot not be productive with our time, then we really run the risk of becoming ruled by it, right? I was thinking about that this week. I'm not sure that there's anything that has my more consistent attention than time. There are things in my life that maybe get more chunks of my attention, but the amount of times that I do this a day, I mean, I'm not even aware of it, but it is so often that I'm tracking the time. And that can often create anxiety for me. It can create shame and guilt when I don't use my time well, right? And it can certainly, the constant pressure, I think that Bethany mentioned, that this linear way of thinking about time creates, it can leave me just ragged, like just tired. So I think that there are some costs to this way of thinking about time. Some good things that have come from it too, and some really helpful things, but there are some costs. So what does Sabbath do? Well, as we talked about, Sabbath disorients and reorients our lives. It disrupts this construct, and I think invites us to see time in a new way. Let's talk about that for a moment. For the let's talk about this. For the ancient people of Israel, the Hebrew people, right, who first got this commandment to hold this day holy and different. The Hebrew people did not see time as linear. And by the way, there are lots of people alive today, lots of cultures today who do not see time in the same way that you and I, if you are a person who's been born in this culture, tend to see time. Like a lot of you have worked with new Americans, people who have refugee status, and you say to them, I'll be there at 1:30 tomorrow to bring you to your 2 o'clock appointment, and you show up at 1:30 and people are sleeping. And I used to think, what a disrespectful thing. I told them I was going to be here. No, there's no disrespect. They just don't think of time in any way the way that we think about it. It's not linear and incremental and always to be measured and attended to. It's just a different way. Well, the Hebrew people saw time very differently as well. And I think maybe one way to think about it is that they saw time not as a line, but as a circle, a cycle. And I'm not saying this is the only way that the Hebrew people saw time, but I think it's one of the main ways. And this would kind of show up in ways that were connected to the creation most commonly. Like, guess what? The sun comes up and the sun goes down. And the sun comes up and the sun goes down. And it's not this, it's just a cycle that repeats itself over and over. The seasons, right? We plant, we grow, we harvest, and the land rests. And so there's a cycle to the way that the creation moves through time. I think about the things that really framed the Hebrew calendar are things like religious holidays and festivals. You and I track time by saying, well, we're going on vacation in July, and the Hebrew people, if this was a thing, it wasn't, but they would say we're going on vacation after Passover. The religious holidays were what framed the time, and the reason is because some of you have been to like a Seder meal, or you have some sense of what Passover maybe looks like for a Jewish family. When you sit down and eat a Passover meal, you're actually eating things that are meant to taste like sweat, the sweat of the slaves when they're in Egypt. Why? Because you're actually hoping to relive the past. It's not that time is aligned, it's that we're circling back to Passover and we're going to relive it again. And when you go to the festival of Sukkot, when I was in Israel in October, we were arriving at the tail end of that, and you find all these temporary shelters everywhere. Tents, tarps, a variety of things, some really nice things. Sukkot is the remembering and the reliving of Israel in the wilderness after they escaped from Egypt, where they had temporary shelters as a people. And so if you're a Jewish person today during Sukkot, you create a temporary shelter. Why? And then you go and live in it, or you at least eat dinner in it, so that you're not just remembering, but you're reliving the past. Because for a Hebrew way of thinking about time, the past and the future are this. The past informs how you live. So you eat the Passover meal and the bitter herbs that remind you of the bitterness of being a slave, so that it would inform your future and it would change the way that you live now and moving forward. So I think this is kind of a common way of thinking about the Sabbath, or the Sabbath. Yes, that is what I want to say. I can't think and talk and move at the same time. Sabbath is something similar, just as a practice. It is cyclical. Every 7 days we come back to this day, which is both the end of the week and the precursor to the beginning of the week. And I think Sabbath is seen as a cyclical rhythm and pattern. Not something that comes along on a line every 7 days, but something that we keep circling back to. And this was weekly, but there was also a Sabbath year. Every 7 years, the cycle would come, and you would give the land rest on the 7th year. From what we can tell, Israel never did this, but it was the commandment. And then every 50 years was Jubilee, where everything would get a rest, and you would return land to people who maybe had to give it up because of financial conditions, or if people had to kind of sell themselves into servanthood, which was very common. You would free them on the Jubilee year. So every week, every 7th year, every 50th year, there's these cycles that God kind of sets up. I was thinking about that this week. What might that mean, or why might that even matter to us today? I think that if we see time as a cycle, one of the things that might happen is time might become less of a ruler and more of a teacher. Let me explain what I mean by that. If on this last Tuesday, what is that, 5 days ago or so, let's say we were at dinner around the table and I said something really unkind to one of my children. I just feel terrible about it. And if times align, I can really feel very guilty about it because I can never go back. I've lost that moment. I can apologize, and I should, but that time, it's lost. It's gone, if we think of time in a linear way. But what if time's more cyclical? Or what if we were to see it that way? Then I might be able to say, well, hold on. That was Tuesday. Guess what? Tuesday's coming again. We'll be around the dinner table again. I'll have conversations with my kids again. How do I want this experience of this last Tuesday to inform future Tuesdays? Now, it's a subtle shift, but I'm kind of curious. I'm really wondering out loud with you almost right now. What would it be like to see time more cyclically? And does it help time be more of a teacher and less of a ruler whose burden we are constantly under, because we have to perform in every moment, because if we don't perform in this moment, it's gone. And what if it's like, well, yeah, but that moment's probably going to come again. Not exactly, but maybe pretty close. And even if it doesn't come back in exactly that same way, or even in a close way, it probably has something to teach us about how we move into the future. So I wonder if Sabbath doesn't invite us to see time in a new way in that sense, less in a linear way and more in a cyclical way. And then I'll offer this other possibility too, that maybe Sabbath just simply sets us free from the tyranny of time. Right? It's interesting, as I said a moment ago, that the only instruction for Sabbath is what? Don't work. Now, the Jewish people spend the next number of centuries trying to tease out what that means, and then that transitions to my mom's parents, my grandparents, teasing out with their Christian Reformed folks what Sabbath meant. And, well, that meant that my mom could throw the ball to her brother and play catch, but they couldn't go and play a game at a ball diamond, because if they played at a ball diamond, it might create work for a park worker who would have to come and reset. These were the kinds of maneuverings that were happening, right? But originally, God just says, don't work. I wonder if that's not in part because work is so linear, or the way at least we think about work, right? We say things like, I need to get this done by, or my next meeting is at, or this project is going to take me this long. We think in very linear terms when it comes to our work. And so perhaps if we are able to set work aside for a Sabbath, then we can be free a little bit of this constant pressure that comes when time is seen as a linear ruler. My guess is that you've had experiences where time has kind of become irrelevant. Do you know what I'm talking about? Can you think of a moment or an event or an experience, would you be willing to share it here, where time just kind of didn't matter? When does that happen for you? What sorts of things are you doing? Sleeping? Yeah, I think that's not wrong. Yeah. Going on a youth retreat, time just kind of doesn't matter. Yeah. What, taking a shower? Classic. I think there's a lot of parents of teenagers who would be like, no, we feel you. We see our teenagers thinking something similar. Oh, yeah, everyone. Sorry, yes. Everyone might feel that way about showers. That's good, Calvin. It just doesn't matter. You're not paying attention to it. What else? Yeah, the enjoyment of something like game night or hanging out with friends can help time just not matter, be irrelevant. Listening to music, yeah, I'm the same. A deep conversation with somebody, yeah. You say prayer, yeah. Good. Yep, grief. That's right. A YouTube, an Instagram, a TikTok rabbit hole. Yeah, name your poison. Absolutely. So I think that Sabbath is meant to create some space for time to not matter. When you look at what are some of the common practices in the Jewish tradition for Sabbath? I don't think these are necessarily prescriptive, but I think they get at what we're talking about here. Again, do you remember what I said last week, that Sabbath always begins with a meal around a table with the people you love? That's where Sabbath starts. And I don't know about you, but when I'm around a table with people I love, time really doesn't matter much. It can creep in if it's a busy school night and we've got to get somewhere. But if it's like a Friday night and there's nowhere to be, time doesn't matter, right? And so Sabbath in the Jewish practice begins that way, almost to say, hey, it doesn't matter. In fact, from what I understand, often people will cover clocks as a way of helping them kind of separate from time. There are prescribed naps in some Jewish kind of traditions. There are also some other prescribed bedroom activities. No joke. To do things that would, again, make time irrelevant to you. Why? Why would that matter? Because I think we are meant to know and experience that time is a gift. It is not a ruler whose pressure we are under to constantly produce and perform. Time is fundamentally and first a gift from God. And one way of maybe experiencing that and knowing that, not just here, but like knowing that here, is doing some things that help time become irrelevant, unimportant. Simply a gift. Simply a vehicle through which we experience something of meaning. So with those kind of thoughts and here's a few questions to end our time here this morning. I'm just going to give a few minutes for reflection. And I only printed these out because I am a person who benefits from having something concrete. And there's a basket of pens. We'll get started passing around here. Oh, yes. Thank you. Just kind of ask yourself for a moment, like, what do you love doing? What sorts of things, maybe I need one more. What sorts of things, when you're doing them, does time just not matter? If you're with people or if you're nearby someone and you want to chat about it instead of like look at this piece of paper or write things down, do that. Let's give you a bunch of them. Start there. Like, what do you love? What's enjoyable? What's fulfilling? What makes time kind of irrelevant, unimportant? And then the next question could be, are those things a part of your life in any sort of regular way? And if not, or maybe they are, but there's some value in this last question. What would it look like? Let's get concrete here. What would it look like to have one of those things a more regular part of your life? A pattern, a rhythm, a cycle. What would you have to do in order for that thing to show up with regularity? Do you need to stop doing something else? Do you need to get the involvement of others? Remember that podcast I played last week, the Ezra Klein show on Sabbath? His guest argues that you cannot do Sabbath on your own. That Sabbath is so counter-cultural, I guess. Time as commodity and time as a linear thing is so woven into our experience that you just can't do it alone. This is her argument. She may be right, she may be wrong. I think it's worth thinking about. So maybe to that last question, part of the answer is, that you need to invite some other people to do it with you. Right? All right. I'll be quiet for a moment here. A lot of you are already thinking about this. Keep reflecting, and then we'll move into communion here. as you're kind of maybe finishing a thought or two, and this certainly may take more time than we have here, just let me encourage you to keep reflecting on this if there is some thinking to do. Let me also invite you to communion. Interesting, right, that it is a meal. This thing that we can get lost in, this thing, when meals are their best and they're with others, we don't care whether it's 7:30 or 8:45. Maybe God is trying to invite us even through this to say, hey, just enjoy this gift. Both the gift of bread and cup, which have a lot to say to us about who God is and who we are, yes, but also just the gift of coming together and sharing a meal. Can we just receive that, be open to that, the simplicity of that gift? So we'll have a couple stations today to receive communion. You can come up and get bread and cup and then take them back to your seat. We'll eat and drink them together. I'd love to have a couple people help serve. Is anybody willing to help do that? Nolan, you want to come on up? Anybody else? Micah, that'd be great. Calvin, that'd be awesome. A couple more? One more at least would be dynamite. There he is. All right. I think that'll do it. So we'll have a station in the back and a station in the front. If you're at home, grab what you need, whatever that might be, whatever you have on hand, get that ready, and then we'll eat and drink these together in just a moment. A gift of love, just as time is a gift of love. This reminder of brokenness and also of wholeness. That yes, Christ's body was, it bore the full weight of anger and jealousy, of sin. And yet his body doesn't stay in the tomb. It is restored. And that same kind of promise extends to us. So we take and eat, remembering those things. and a gift that comes to us because a life has been surrendered and poured out. And when you pour out your life, when you surrender it to others, there is a gift given too. So we take and drink remembering this today. I'll pass this little basket around. It'll make its way eventually. You can put your cup in there if you'd like. And let me invite you to stand. We have one more song to sing here as we near the end of our time together this morning. Let's join together and lift our voices.
Above every other name, Jesus, the only one who could ever save, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. You open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. You open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Upon your love, it is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be
composed of hours that sustain rather than stress, of days that deliver rather than destroy. By your ever restful grace, allow us to enter your Sabbath rest as your Sabbath rest enters into us. Go in peace. Go in peace, friends. Good to be with you.